Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome into the Week 11 edition of the Sunday Sideline Report on the Sports Insanity Network. I am Mike Rifkin, ready to bring you all of the Week 11 action as we prep for the Sunday afternoon slate in the National Football League. We'll start with some news first that came down this morning from Ian Rappaport, NFL Network, and I believe his co-worker Tom Pelissero. They've reported that wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr., he will sign after Thanksgiving, which is Thursday. And apparently the two front runners, ironically, they do play each other on Thanksgiving, and they are in the same division. We're talking the Dallas Cowboys, and we're talking the New York Giants. The Cowboys we've heard about. We've heard Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones talk about making a play for Odell Beckham. The Giants are the sneaky one in here because the Giants, first and foremost, I don't think anyone thought they'd be 7-2. Just make sure I get the record. 7-2 coming into today. No one thought they'd be 7-2. But the other part is for the Giants is how everything ended with Odell a couple of years ago when then general manager Dave Gettleman shipped him off to Cleveland. And he went there and, stuff has gone down. To be honest with you, I think Odell's a great fit for the Giants, personally. The one question is the money is what it's going to come down to, just because the Giants don't have that much cap space. Joe Schoen has inherited a really tough job from Dave Gettleman, but you get Odell Beckham in there, this becomes a totally different team. They will finally have a number one wide receiver, which they hoped Kenny Golladay would be. That's been a total bust. And now, Sterling Shepard's out for the year. So they're relying on guys like Darius Slayton and David Sills. But so the fit's there. The need is there for the New York Football Giants as well. Dallas, it's a little bit different because if you're looking for the team that can win the Super Bowl, if you're Odell Beckham, Dallas is probably closer to the Super Bowl. But if you're talking unfinished business and a very high upside team, then I think it's the Giants. In Dallas, he would have CeeDee Lamb with him. He'd have Michael Gallup with him. The running back duo of Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard. So I think that would be – it's an interesting dilemma if you're Odell Beckham. You see Micah Parsons try to recruit him on Twitter. We've seen that some of the Giants players have been asked questions on Odell. So I'm intrigued by it. I thought there'd be other teams involved, but I guess those are the final two. I think the Giants make more sense. But if he goes to sign with Dallas, he's looking for another ring, which is fair. You'll never talk poorly about a guy looking to win another ring. So Dallas, the Giants, I still think, for me, Buffalo should still be in the mix, but live and learn. So we'll see what happens there with Odell Beckham. Also news out of Vegas this week, Raiders owner Mark Davis. Raiders owner Mark Davis said Josh McDaniels will return to being the coach next year. part of his statement was Rome wasn't built in a day. Major issue with that statement because of this. The Las Vegas Raiders last year were a playoff team, and they almost beat the team that went on to win the AFC, that being the Cincinnati Bengals. Then during the offseason, they went out and they said they went out and acquired Devontae Adams and Chandler Jones. Those are not moves. Those are not moves to say we're building block. These are moves to say we want to win and want to win now. And now, because you've seen the regression of this team that now sits with a record of 2-7, and you're going to say it's not all in the coaching. I mean, here's the truth: they can't afford another coach. After what went down with John Gruden, if they fire McDaniels, that's money. You're going to pay 2 coaches off the books, and you're going to get a third coach in there. And who's going to want this job? I'm very curious to see what they do with Derek Carr this offseason. It's a weird for me to talk about the Raiders because I didn't have a high expectation of them. I didn't think they were a playoff team. I wouldn't have been shocked if they were a playoff team, but the Raiders got a Raider, and that's what this season's been for them. They've completely Raidered off this season, and so I think the big thing for me is how long's the leash on McDaniels next year? If they start off 0-2, 0-3, is it then when they decide, hey, he's not the coach, or is it going to be, hey, he's going to get the whole season? There's a lot of things going on right now with the Raiders. There's a lot of things to watch. So as you go forward, give me 1 second. But the Raiders are in a position now where let's be honest here. We thought the AFC West would be the best division in football. It's not. It hasn't been. I think a lot of people are disappointed in what the AFC West has brought. All 4 teams actually play each other today. The Raiders are in Denver. Denver's a whole nother mess. And I think the stat was this week, someone sent it to me. If Denver had scored just 18 points in every game, they'd be 8-1. So that's that's the big thing right now. Like Denver's got their own issues. The Raiders for sure have their own issues. The Chargers and the Chiefs. Let me phrase it back. The Chargers have had injury issues. They look like they'll get Keenan Allen and Mike Williams both back tonight, which would be huge. Kansas City's going to be down a couple of receivers tonight. Juju Smith-Schuster's been ruled out. Mecole Hardman was put on IR, so Chiefs are a little banged up, but I still think the Chiefs are, if not the best team in football, one of the best teams in football. So That's the interesting conversation that teams are going to have. But I've the Chiefs are the Chiefs. So every year we expect somebody to come out and challenge them. They don't get challenged. This was the year we thought, but at 7-2, big game in LA tonight for the Chargers. Get into it a little bit later. But we did have a game on Thursday night, which saw the Titans beat the Packers 27-17. Ryan Tannehill, 22-27, 333 yards, 2 touchdowns. Derrick Henry also threw a touchdown pass. He also had a rushing touchdown. Austin Hooper had 2 receiving touchdowns and the one for Tennessee. In the loss, Aaron Rodgers, 24 of 39, 227 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Again, the Packers unable to run the ball, only ran the ball for 56 yards, averaged 2.9 a carry. Randall Cobb's returned to the lineup, 6 catches, 73 yards. And Christian Watson continued his good play. He had 2 touchdowns off the 3 touchdown game he had last week. So here's the thing. I'll start with. I'll start with Tennessee. They're gonna win the AFC South. Apologies for the spoiler, but they're gonna win the AFC South again. And at 7-3, I don't feel they get the love they deserve. But I think there's a good reason for that, because we had this conversation on the Wishbone Shotgun podcast this week. Check it out. Anchor, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And the conversation took us to this level, and that was this. We did a top 10 power ranking of teams. And I think a lot of us had the Titans low on that list. It's not because the Titans are a bad football team. They're a very good football team, well coached. Week 2, they got beaten down by the Bills in Buffalo. And it was a beatdown. And a couple of weeks ago, they lost to Kansas City in overtime. Now, granted, Ryan Tannehill didn't play. That was Malik Willis. But I still feel with the Tennessee Titans, there's something I need to see before I could say definitive Super Bowl contender. They're going to make the playoffs. But how do they match up going forward with teams like the Bills, the Chiefs again? Those are 2 they'll probably play. The Miami Dolphins, teams that they may probably see come playoff time. And if you look at the Titans' schedule, so the next 2 weeks are very interesting. They play the Bengals next week in what is a rematch from the playoffs. Then they go to Philly. Talk about them in a little bit. And then they end the year with the Jaguars, at the Chargers, which is an interesting game, the Texans, the Cowboys, and then they'll end the year against the Jags. Am I missing a game? No. So it'll be Bengals, Eagles, Jags, Chargers, Texans, Cowboys, Jags. So that's what's left for the Titans. So interested to see where they line up seeding wise, because they're going to win the South. Mark it down. They're going to win the AFC South. Flip side it for the Green Bay Packers. Stick a fork in them. They're done. It's over. Season's over. They had an opportunity coming off that great win last week against the Dallas Cowboys. They had an opportunity. Hey, we can make it 2 in a row. We get back to, if they'd won this game, they would have been 5-6. Okay. And it's not their year, and let's be fair to them, that the rest of the schedule is pretty favorable. At Philly next week, at Chicago, who's playing better, but it's a favorable game. Hosting the Rams, which right now looks like it'll be minus Cooper Kupp. They play the Vikings, they play the Lions, and they spent Christmas Day in Miami. So that's their remaining schedule, because outside of Philly and Miami, even Minnesota, I know Minnesota's good, and Minnesota thumped them in week 1. They owe Minnesota a receipt in Lambeau, but this team's done. They're done, and we could say whatever there's a lot of people who want to blame Aaron Rodgers, and there's a lot of people who want to blame Matt LaFleur, and there's a lot of people who. Here's the whole thing. This team's just not good. They're not good. Offensively, they have not run the ball effectively, which doesn't make sense. The receivers aren't great. Christian Watson's come on the last 2 weeks, so shout out to him for, I think it's 5 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. Lazard's not a number one. Randall Cobb comes back into the lineup. He has a nice game, but again, not a number one receiver. The defense can't stop anybody, so that's the issues in Green Bay. And look, I've heard people say it, analysts say it, I've read it. Is it time to go to Jordan Love? If your plan the whole time was to go to Jordan Love at some point, you probably shouldn't have brought back Aaron Rodgers at any point and just let Jordan Love take his bumps. Unless this team's out of it, and they'll be out of it, I wouldn't play Jordan Love for a couple of weeks, because if you bench Aaron Rodgers now, it'll be almost reminiscent of when the Giants benched Eli Manning in favor of Geno Smith. The one difference is the Giants knew Geno Smith was not the answer. The Packers are hoping Jordan Love's their long-term answer. But let's be honest, the Packers haven't been in this spot in a long time. They went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, and there was no real drop-off. Jordan Love made one start last year because of COVID with Aaron Rodgers. So we don't know what Jordan Love is. And let's be fair, if Jordan Love is the guy they want to put long term, is this the team you want to do it with? Are you okay with this roster outside of, but I don't know. They're going to have a lot of questions, because if they want to go to Jordan Love, where are they going to? Because I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to retire off this year. I don't. And I think there's a couple of teams that'll look at him and say, you know what? If we want to win, is Aaron Rodgers still Aaron Rodgers? I mean, prior to this year, back-to-back MVPs. Where are we going in the next 3 years? You're going to have to search for a team who Aaron's going to want to win. So he's going to want to go to a winner if the plan is to move off. So go right down the list right now of teams who potentially could win, and if they can match up with what the Packers are going to ask for, which I would presume is a haul of picks. You know, who's that team right now? Like, Denver can't do it. They just signed Russell Wilson. So they're out, and they made the most sense because of Nathaniel Hackett. You know, I just brought up the Raiders. Reunite him and Devontae Adams. Is that possible? I don't know. But then where does Derek Carr go? You know, you know, I think San Francisco would make a ton of sense. They don't have. I don't know if they have the draft capital because Miami owned their first round pick. They just shipped that to Denver in the Bradley Chubb deal. So, and then plus what happens with Trey Lance next year. So who knows about San Francisco? I don't think Rodgers would want to replace Brady in Tampa. So right there, you know, we're talking 5 teams who are probably not involved, and that doesn't even include the teams who do have quarterbacks. You know, so where unless Rodgers is going to sit and wait to see what happens with Sean Payton, and those two link up somewhere, unless Payton winds up in a spot where there is a quarterback already in place. So it'll be interesting to see how the Rodgers dilemma unfolds during the offseason. I think I could say pretty confidently, I don't think he's a Packer next year. But we'll wait and see. But the Titans get a nice the Titans get a very nice win on Thursday night. And the realistically ending the Packers season. So weird to say the Packers are done before Thanksgiving, but here we are. So as we enter the Sunday slate, Week 11, there's some interesting games out there that we'll talk about. I'm going to start with one that I don't think a lot of people want to talk about, but I'll do it because I think both teams could be put in the highly disappointing category of teams in the NFL. And that would be the Rams going to New Orleans to play the Saints. In a game where both teams, I mean, if they're hanging on, it's by the slimmest of margins. The Rams have not played well all year. And for the weirdest thing, I could say it's the defense, it's the offense. It's a Sean McVay-led offense that has not played well all year. Matt Stafford hasn't been good. When he's played, he didn't play last week, but he hasn't been good. They've had no resemblance of a running game. They're bottom of the league in rushing yards per game. Their offense is a one-man show. It's the Cooper Kupp show, and guess what? Cooper Kupp's not playing today. Cooper Kupp's not playing for the next probably 4 to 6 weeks he had ankle surgery after taking a hit last week. And the only way you'd probably bring Cooper Kupp back is if you were in the playoff race, which right now the Rams are 3-6 and have no resemblance of a playoff team. They don't even look like the same team that won the Super Bowl. And I don't know what happened. You know, I can't solely just say Andrew Whitworth's retirement is what did this, but the offensive line's been bad. Stafford's been bad. Allen Robinson has been terrible for him. He'll need to step up in the absence of Cooper Kupp. Van Jefferson will have to step up. Higbee's going to have to step up. But this team, man, I'm not saying McVay's on the hot seat because there's no way, but I mean, I'm the Stafford thing intrigues me because he's reverted back a little bit to I don't even want to call him Detroit Stafford, but he just hasn't been good, you know. So that's the Rams. Flip side, the only reason the Saints are still alive is because nobody wants to win the NFC South. I know the Bucks have won 2 in a row, but I'm not buying him still. I know it's weird to say that about Brady, but the Saints have just. I mean, they lost last week to Kenny Pickett and the Steelers, who, again, I don't think are that good. But if you look at them, the Saints, and starts, week one they beat the Falcons by a point. They lose to the Bucks in a tight game, but they throw the pick six late. Lose by 8 to the Panthers. Lose by a field goal to the Vikings in London. They had hit a post on a field goal attempt or the crossbar to tie the game. 30 lose a 30-26 game to the Bengals. Lose an 8-point game to the Cardinals in a game where Andy Dalton threw 3 picks, I believe, including 2 pick sixes. So there's that game. Then they lose to the Ravens, and then they lose last week to the Steelers. But then they have games like against the Raiders, and they shut out the Raiders. Now, I don't know if that's more indicative of them or the Raiders, but this was the first year for the Saints without Sean Payton. And this offense, again, similar thing to the Rams. It's offensively, they don't look like the same team. Alvin Kamara has 3 touchdowns on the season, 1 rushing. They all came in the same game. That was in that Raider game. Michael Thomas is hurt again, which really sucks. Jarvis Landry, hasn't been healthy. Chris Olave's been fantastic, but when you don't have a consistent quarterback to get you the football, and Jameis made a statement, I think it was yesterday or the other day, talking about losing his job to injury and nobody should lose their job to injury. And he's not wrong. But if you don't, I thought if the Saints are going to be successful, Jameis was going to have a big year. And I thought James would have had that big year. Michael Thomas was going to be healthy, Jarvis, Olave, and plus Kamara. It might be time for this team to tear it down. Maybe see what you could get for Michael Thomas. It probably won't be much. See what you can get in a deal for Cam Jordan. See what you could get in a deal for Demario Davis. Even Kamara. It might be time to rebuild this whole thing. And the run they went on with Drew Brees and Sean Payton was awesome. But Dennis Allen's not Sean Payton, and I don't see Drew Brees walking through that door. Now, the one thing they may say in the front office is this division is very winnable next year. If Tom Brady walks away, it's just dependent on who the Bucs quarterback is, because Atlanta can't get out of their own way. I don't necessarily love their roster. Carolina, they're going back to Baker Mayfield today, but I don't trust them either they haven't found their quarterback. The division's there, but the Saints the only way for me that say the Saints are in a decent spot is if they go get a quarterback. That's not Jameis. That's not Andy Dalton. So they don't have a first round pick. That belongs to the Philadelphia Eagles, which great for the Eagles, right? But are they the team that's going to go sign Garoppolo? Are they the team who finds a way? Maybe they're the team who could find a way to trade for Rodgers or somebody. And is Dennis Allen the coach? I don't know. I don't like firing a coach after 1 year, but this team, for me, they're too talented to be this bad. And a lot of people are going to say, well, they're competitive in a lot of these losses. That's fair. But this is a team that had a high expectation, and they have not played well enough for me to throw them their beads on Mardi Gras. That's how I feel on the Saints. So Rams, Saints, loser's probably done, and the winner gets to cling on to life for another week. So there's that. Then we have an interesting game in Detroit. And I'll get to why it's in Detroit in a second. The Browns play the Bills in Detroit because of all of the snow that's gone on in all of the snow that's fallen in Western New York. So hopefully everybody in that area stays safe. But that game got moved to Detroit. Cleveland, I think, bust to Detroit. The Bills flew out yesterday and landed safely, but that game will be in Detroit. The Bills will stay in Detroit because they play the Lions on Thanksgiving. But two teams coming off of losses that, Cleveland now sits at 3-6, off a loss to the Dolphins last week. And I think Cleveland's just counting it down. Excuse me. They're counting it down the weeks until they get Deshaun Watson back, and that's their hope. Because I'm not faulting Jacoby Brissett here because he was put in an impossible spot because of what happened with Watson. Jacoby Brissett hasn't played terribly. He's played okay. He's played good enough. Chubb for me is him and Derrick Henry right now. They're probably the two best running backs in all of football. Kareem Hunt. The receiver position's a little. Cooper's been okay. Donovan Peoples-Jones has been okay. The Njoku injuries hurt. The offensive line has not been as dominant as it was a year ago. And the defense hasn't played great either. So outside of Myles Garrett, who we always know he's going to be the defensive player of the year run. But so Cleveland's 3-6, and they're probably waiting on Watson, which is a couple of weeks away. He returned to practice this week. So, and then there's the Bills, who found a way to lose a game last week that, if you're a baseball fan, it reminds me of a way the New York Mets would have lost a game probably from 2009 to about 2013. The Bills found a way to lose a game where they were up 10 points, fourth quarter. And then they get a stop on a 4th and goal play where Kirk Cousins couldn't get a quarterback sneak in, which I don't love the call anyway, but I'll digress on that. And then Josh Allen fumbled a snap. recovered by the Vikings for a touchdown with 30 seconds left or whatever it was. And then the Bills were able to drive down the field, aided by a Gabe Davis catch that could have and should have been reviewed. Wasn't. Kick a field goal. Overtime, the Vikings kick a field goal. The Bills get the ball. They go down the field, and then Josh Allen throws an interception in the end zone to Patrick Peterson. The Bills season, the Bills are a very talented team, but their entire season hinges on how Josh Allen plays. And if you remember going back to last year, when the Kansas City Chiefs were struggling, and they struggled at points last year, no one's going to deny that. Everyone pointed to Patrick Mahomes and saying he's not reading this right. I don't know where this is going. I don't know what this is. And we said he'll probably come out of it because he's Patrick Mahomes. I think we could have that same question right now on Josh Allen. In particular, the last couple of weeks. And I know he's playing with a bad elbow, but he's in a situation right now where I think people have to realize he's just got to take certain things. This team is good. This team is talented on the offensive side of the ball. Singletary, Cook, Hines in the backfield. Stephon Diggs is one of the best receivers in football. Gabe Davis is immensely talented. Dawson Knox, they just gave a nice deal to a tight end. This team has all the makings of a team that could win it all. And I'm not saying Josh Allen's holding them back, but these mistakes can't happen right now. And they can't happen in January because that's what's going to beat you in January. I know they're banged up in the secondary as well. They're banged up. That happens. There's nothing you can do. But he and I love him for taking onus on. He put the blame on himself last week, and it's not that he had to do that. Even though it sounds like you think I'm going to blame him. But that's leadership. That is culpability. And that's what you want out of your franchise quarterback. And really out of your franchise. But as long as Sean McDermott's the head coach, Brandon Beane's the GM, Allen's the core, this is where I think maybe they do need Odell Beckham because that'll help alleviate a lot of the pain that they get. But I think the other part is I'd like to see them incorporate a little bit more Nyheim Hines into the pass game. If that's why you went out and got him, that would be, I think, something that would be nice for them. But they need to figure that out sooner rather than later. I do think the Bills are a playoff team. They're now 0-2 in the AFC East. They've lost 2 in a row. But they get back-to-back games in the same place, so they'll probably just stay in Detroit after today because then they play the Lions on Thursday, Thanksgiving. But after that, then they play New England. Then they play the Jets. Again, then they play the host, the Dolphins. Then they play Chicago, the Bengals, and the Patriots. So, the Bills have an opportunity here to kind of right the ship, and I kind of expect them to. Vegas has this right now. The Bills are favored by 8. It may be bad in Detroit. If the Bills watched film of what the Dolphins did last week, I think the Bills could have a really nice game tonight. Nice bounce back. All right. In Indy, we got the Eagles and the Colts. in a game I think is interesting for this part. How does Philly respond after their first loss of the season? I think this is a question. I do, because I'm always interested when you're that last undefeated team, how you respond after that first loss. We saw it last year with the Cardinals, and they didn't respond well. And a lot of people could say, well, DeAndre Hopkins got hurt, and it doesn't matter to me. You respond on how you respond. Now, I think the Eagles are a well-coached football team. They love to run the football. They brought in Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph to help the front out this week. Joseph's going to play. Suh, we're not sure about. So I think Jalen Hurts will be fine. Excuse me. Brown and Smith, they've got weapons galore. They'll miss Dallas Goedert, but they still have a good amount offensively. Flip side to the Colts. Great win over the Raiders last week in Jeff Saturday's debut. Jonathan Taylor had his best game since week 1. The offensive line played really well. Matt Ryan had, I think it was a 39-yard run, and they found a way to win. And look, people are critical of the Jeff Saturday hire, myself included, but he got a result. He got a win last week, and that's all you can ask for. So let's see how this plays out. We may not like how it went down, but let's see how this plays out for the rest of the year, because Jeff Saturday, he's got a chance here. Look, and to the people who are critical, I want you to keep that same energy with the Raiders and McDaniels, because he's been atrocious. But you're going to say, oh, he worked his way because he worked under Bill Belichick after, weaseling out of the Raider deal. So out of the Colt deal that he had signed a couple of years ago. But the Colts look to make 2 in a row. The Eagles look to bounce back. I like Philly. I do. They're really good. If the Colts can keep it competitive, that'd be pretty good for Jeff Saturday. But I don't know. This is a good Philly team. This is definitely an upgrade in competition from the Raiders to the Eagles. So, that'll take place in Indy. Interesting one, AFC East, Jets, Patriots. The AFC East and the NFC East have all of their teams at least 500 or better. Both teams coming off their bye week, the Jets and the Patriots. And the Jets are coming off that nice win over the Bills. Then they got the bye week. But this is a game, I think if you talk to Jet fans this week, this is a big game because last time they played New England, it was at MetLife. And Robert Saleh was telling everybody, get to MetLife early. This is, we're going to turn this around because we're playing so well right now. And they proceeded to lose the game because their quarterback threw costly interceptions. And then there was some backlash on Saleh, but, they've responded in kind, responded well. But this is a game where if there's a team you want to beat in the AFCs, you may want to beat the Bills because of how good they are. New England's owned you the last 20 years. They've owned everyone. Let's be realistic. They've owned everyone, but the Jets need this game. This isn't they were competitive. They have to win this game. If they want to be taken seriously, they need to win this game. And whether this isn't about being competitive. This isn't about this is about ending it's about the mentality, because you don't want to walk into this game already defeated. I mean, you're 6-3, they're 5-4. You win this game, you actually go into Thanksgiving in first place in the AFC East. You lose this game, all of a sudden, you lose a tiebreaker to this team in New England. You don't play them again. They would have swept you again. So you need this game for the Jets, but I think it's just for the upstairs. Well, like we can talk about the Jets schedule coming up. After today, they play Chicago next week. Then they play Minnesota, the Bills, the Lions, the Jags, the Seahawks, and then they'll end the year against the Miami Dolphins. But for New England, for them to be 5-4, but their upcoming schedule, they'll play the Jets today. They'll go to Minnesota Thanksgiving night. Then they play the Bills. Then they play the Cardinals, the Raiders, the Bengals, the Dolphins, and then the Bills. So two teams right now looking in the AFCs. One has to win here, and New England's favored, but for me, this is a much bigger game for the Jets than it is New England. Much, much, much bigger for the Jets. But, it's never easy to go into Foxborough. And never has been, never will be, as long as Bill Belichick's the coach. But I like until the Jets can prove they can beat New England, you're going to take New England every time. So, that's a battle in the AFC East. Brought up the AFC West a little bit ago. Raiders play the Broncos, Chiefs, Chargers Sunday night game. Huge game for the Chargers. They're going to get Keenan Allen, Mike Williams back, it looks like. For the Chiefs, they're banged up. No Juju Smith-Schuster, no Hardman. That being said, Herbert really hasn't looked like Herbert since he took that injury in week 2 against the Chiefs. So I'm intrigued by how this plays out, but I think Kansas City's playing better. I think outside of Minnesota, who I'll talk about in a minute, I think Kansas City's playing great football. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, they only beat the Jags by 10, but they were up so huge in that game last week. So I kind of like Kansas City. I like Kansas City a lot. So, but that's an interesting game in the AFC West. Big game in the NFC. Not in the NFC, not in the divisional part, but just the conference. Cowboys Vikings, and two teams who are coming off different kinds of games. The Vikings get that big win I talked about earlier against the Bills. The Cowboys, for the first time after leading by 14 points in the fourth quarter, lose in overtime to the Green Bay Packers. Excuse me. There's a lot of people out there. I think there's a lot of people out there who are wondering, what are both these teams? Is Minnesota really 8-1? And how is Minnesota 8-1 off of some of these games? They're finding ways to win these one possession games. They really are finding ways. And you could say whatever you want about Kirk Cousins. He's not that good. He's not a primetime guy. And that's fine. They're winning, though. And you got to give them the respect they deserve at 8-1. Their only loss was to Philly, in Philly. So that's Justin Jefferson, who made arguably the greatest catch of my lifetime last week in that fourth quarter. So you got that going for Dalvin Cook. This is a good team. Got a good feeling. The Cowboys are interesting. They're 6-3 and they're immensely talented. How do they respond off of this loss last week? That looks like they'll get Zeke back this week to pair up with Pollard. Dak was okay, I guess, on Sunday last week. There were a couple of picks, and whether it was on him or the receivers, he still threw them. McCarthy's aggressiveness to go for it on fourth down kind of bit them in the rear. The key for me around Dallas has always been discipline, and it's discipline in terms of their penalties, and they're disciplined in other aspects. Discipline doesn't always mean just penalties, but you're disciplined in how we play a certain way and how we go about business. And it gets to be a mindset. If they don't get to the quarterback, what happens? That's a problem. Trayvon Diggs hasn't had the same year he had a year ago, but he can only take away one side of one guy. So if he's on Lazard, Christian Watson burned him for 3 touchdowns. So, those are questions on the defense. Offensively, they should be able to put up points with everybody. Dak is very good. CeeDee Lamb is elite. Michael Gallup's back. The running backs are healthy. Dalton Schultz is back. So I kind of like where Dallas is. I want to see how they respond in this game. I actually really like Dallas in this football game. I think Minnesota coming off that huge win, Dallas coming off that loss, it's kind of two ships passing in the night, but I like the Cowboys. I don't have a real reason. I think the Cowboy defense plays really well today. I think the Cowboys win this game. I think they find a way to win this game. And I really do. And that, I want to say that's painful because I'm not a Cowboy supporter, but that'll set up an interesting game because I think this game will gear the Cowboys up for what's coming Thursday, which is rematch with the Giants and what should be, in my mind, a really that's a great divisional game on Thanksgiving. The Giants have kind of a trap game this week. The Detroit Lions come into town, and they could put up points with anybody, but that's Thanksgiving today. It's Cowboys, Vikings, Giants, Lions. So intrigued by where the Cowboys go because I think the Cowboys, if the Cowboys can win this game, I think there's a lot of people who pronounce the Cowboys as the best team in the NFC. I'm not one of those people, but I do think they're one of the 4 best. I'll put them right there with Philly. Although my question about Philly is Philly beat them with Cooper Rush, but but they're right there with Philly, Minnesota. And I think the fourth best team in the NFC is San Francisco. And they'll play Arizona tomorrow night in a game where they're looking to win their third straight. Arizona's barely holding on to their playoff hopes. But the big thing for me on San Francisco, we don't know who's playing quarterback yet for the Cardinals. Kyler Murray's questionable. Hamstring issue. The Niners have not played well against the Cardinals recently. In fact, Kyle Shanahan's 3-7 against the Cardinals in 10 games. So the Niners are going to have to find a way, but they found a way to beat the Chargers last week. I think they'll find a way to beat the Cardinals, but the Cowboys and the Vikings is a good one. That's a real interesting one. Also, you got the Bengals and the Steelers in an AFC North showdown. The Bengals are looking for revenge after what happened week 1. TJ Watt returned last week for Pittsburgh in their win over the Saints, but I don't think the Steelers I don't think this turns them around. I still don't think they're that great of a team, but the Bengals, to me, are the story. Like, they're coming off that game against Carolina where they won 42 to 21, was it? 42 to 21, and they were up 28-0 at halftime, something like that. They're playing they'd be so dangerous offensively. Joe Mixon had the great day 2 weeks ago. Chase is still up, but you still have Boyd, you still have Higgins. This is a good football team. I think we put a lot of pressure on them early because of the run they went on to the Super Bowl. And if you look at their schedule early, like, they lost to Pittsburgh in overtime in a game where Joe Burrow threw 5 picks. They lost to Dallas by a field goal. But then they reeled off 2 in a row over the Jets and Dolphins. Lose to Baltimore in a tight game. Beat the Saints in a tight game. Beat the Falcons. Halloween got destroyed by Cleveland. Beat Carolina before their bye week, but now they go at Pittsburgh, at 10. These are their next 3. At Pittsburgh today, at Tennessee next week, and then 2 weeks at home. The Chiefs come to town before a rematch with the Browns, and then they play the Bucs before Christmas Eve at New England, and then end the season Buffalo, Baltimore. So this stretch for the Bengals, I'm going to just take these first 3 first. Like, Pittsburgh, divisional game. And Pittsburgh they're still the standard in the AFC North because Cleveland's had its moments. Pittsburgh and Baltimore are still the standard bearers. I don't care about the record right now. You still got to go into Pittsburgh and beat them. Next week's at Tennessee. Playoff rematch. I think that's an exciting one. Kansas City in 2 weeks. That's an AFC title game rematch. That's also a rematch of a great game in the regular season last year. Cleveland, you're looking for payback after Halloween. At Tampa Bay, Brady, Burrow should be interesting. At New England, that's probably going to have some sort of playoff implication involved. Buffalo, that probably will have playoff implications. Baltimore might be inclined could be inclined for the division. It could be inclined for just playoff implications as well. But the Bengals, Steelers, I'm intrigued. It's an interesting day for a lot of what's going to happen today in the NFL. There's a lot of playoff implication games. And I think there's a couple of trap games. I think the Giant game, I think, is a total trap. I cue up my guy Admiral Akbar because it's a trap at MetLife. I do think the Giants win, but I would not be surprised if the Lions found a way. Let's see. I think Philly's in line here, a trap game. After that loss to Washington, they have Green Bay next week. This could be a trap game for Philly. Possibly also a trap game for the. Let's see if Baltimore's in. Baltimore's playing Carolina, and I'd say it's a. I wouldn't say it's a trip. They play Jacksonville next week, so forget that. Potentially a trap game maybe for the Niners here because they're playing well. The Cardinals really aren't. The Cardinals have had their number, but the Niners also. Now they play the Saints next week, but actually look at the back half of the Niners schedule. The Cardinals tomorrow. They get their next 4 at home, although tomorrow night doesn't count as it counts as a home game, but it's being played in Mexico City. But they get the Saints at home, the Dolphins at home, the Bucks at home before going to Seattle. I'm sorry, I got confused for a second because it says versus Arizona twice. So I guess the Cardinals get the home game in Mexico City. But there's that. Yeah, so there's a couple of traps. I think the Giants are in line for a trap. That's really the big one. Just quickly, I'll go through the Thanksgiving games too while I'm at it because you got 3 good ones. Giants, Cowboys, NFC East implications on the line. Both teams playing really good football for the most part. The Bills look to right the ship today against Cleveland, Thursday against Detroit, and they're playing in Detroit today. So intrigued by how that'll play out. But the Bills are trying to right the ship. The Lions are the Lions. They're competitive. I give the Lions this. I think the Lions have a lot of talent. I think their offensive line is really good. Amon-Ra St. Brown is really turned it on. They have the 2 good running backs in Williams and Swift. I'm not big on Jared Goff. I don't think he's the long-term guy, but he's played okay at times. The defense, they don't stop many people. But they got a win last week in Chicago, so they found a way to beat the Bears. But here's that. And then the Thursday night one is interesting. Patriots, Vikings. Both teams have a big one today. The Patriots against the Jets, the Vikings against the Dallas Cowboys. The narrative always about Kirk Cousins in the primetime game is he doesn't play well. Well, he's going to have an opportunity these next 2. This game today isn't primetime, but it's the 4:25 kickoff. So I always viewed those games as primetime because most of the time that's what most of the country is seeing. But then Thanksgiving night, he plays the Patriots. And I'm intrigued by it. I think it's an interesting matchup for both teams. The Vikings are going to probably win the NFC North without much competition. New England, for me, they've surprised at 5-4, but we'll see how both teams respond off their games today, Thursday. That should be a lot of fun. It really should be a lot of fun. 3 really good games. I'm just happy they didn't give us Lions Bears for what would feel like the 5th straight year. That's really all I'm happy about. But Bills, Lions, Giants, Cowboys, Vikings, Patriots. Those are great games on Thursday. Really good games with a lot of playoff implications on the line. Giants, Cowboys, NFC East race. The Bills are in the thick of thick of things in the AFC, and so are the Patriots and the Vikings. So, Vikings, NFC, Patriots, AFC. But it's fun. It's fun stuff. Enjoy today's action, and then enjoy Thursday's action while you're with your family, having a great Thanksgiving. From everyone at SIN, we hope you have a happy Thanksgiving. I'll be back next week to recap those 3 games and preview next Sunday's slate of games. So until next week, I'm Mike Griffin. Check out the website, www.thesportsinsanitynetwork.com. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, other stuff. Check out all the podcasts, Google, Anchor, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. But I'm Mike Griffin for SIN Sunday Sideline Report. Have a great day. Enjoy the football